And if we start taking actions that make a difference and start reducing emissions, going to a more cleaner way uh, of producing our life, our sustainable, into a more sustainable life, energy that is cleaner and not polluting, and we'll all gain from a health perspective, but also primarily because these dangers will be alleviated. It won't be as bad as the forecasts could be.
You know, in your report and subsequent reports that have highlighted the same issue, one of the things that jumps out is how is the rest of the world responding? And specifically, to what extent are countries like the United States, Russia, and other places, other industrialized countries, that have been the main perpetrators in global emissions, to what extent are they taking responsibility for this? Do you have any sense of global policy changes that are underway?
Yeah, that is the key question, really, and depending on when you think about it, it can be very sad, depressing, or occasionally a little bit more optimistic. The big debate has been over the last several years between the more developed countries who say, "Oh, we need to do something," but everybody else needs to be on board, and the developing countries. I mean, I'm simplifying, but it did have these two sides saying, "Wait a minute, you're the ones who, in your development and your creation of industries, have contributed most of the greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere that are that are brought us to this situation. You have to go first. You have the money. You have to help us, get out of this." And the other side, the developed countries have been, and it is backed by a lot of analysis saying, yes, but going forward, even if we bring our emissions down to zero, the development in the greater part of the world, China, India, Africa, Latin America, will overwhelm, the contributions that have been from the developed countries up to now, and they're both true. So, but the responsibility to act and to move first has to be with those who have the historical responsibility for getting us here, and B, who have the resources. So it really is in everyone's interest, even in developed countries' interest, in coordinating the needed research and investment to make sure that the developing world has an alternative that isn't the same one for developing the industry and commerce and so on in a way that isn't following the historic pattern, which is the more development there is, the greater consumption of energy, the greater greenhouse gases. So that's something that is where the divorce needs to happen. And countries are doing things. Some advanced countries are doing quite well. In moving along those lines. Like Germany and Spain, and the U.S. is taking some steps, not so much at the federal level, although now there seems to be a beginning of it. But there are a lot of regional initiatives, states and groups of states. And even in the developing world, a lot of countries realize that, China is the number one polluter in a way now that it's reached this level of economic activity. But China is also one of the biggest investors in solar and wind and other energy technologies, because they see what the future looks like, and they know that they have to change that. So I think in international politics and policy, it's very complex. There's a lot of finger pointing for years and years, but I think we're at the point where studies show that every few years, every 5 years that we let go by pointing fingers, we really make it that much more costly and difficult down the line. And I think it's beginning to sink in. In the next year, the world community through the UN has set itself the deadline of 2015 to come up with a good agreement on how to proceed. There's a lot of skepticism because they haven't been able to do it in the past, but it needs to happen. There is no alternative. As my colleague Frank Ackerman, who I used to work for, has written a book, "Can We Afford the Future?" And the question sounds silly, but it really is the question, right? Can we afford the future? Do we have a choice, really?
Well, that raises a very important question. What's the relationship then between addressing these issues, both globally as well as within the Caribbean, and an alternative economic framework?
There are industries that are beginning to see, we can do quite well if we are the first movers into these areas. And so even in the traditional energy industry, some people are hedging their bets and beginning to move into healthier, cleaner technologies. But I think one of the interesting things along that way is that in the business community, there's a growing recognition in the investment world that this whole issue of risky investments, that at some point there's a growing realization that just because you own a huge amount of reserves of oil, coal, and all that, as the world consensus changes towards leaving those on the ground, unburned, unprocessed, if you keep buying and holding onto these assets, they may become what's called, stranded assets. So there's a growing pressure in the business investment community from many groups. There's one in Boston series that does a lot of work in that to highlight that at some point, even from a financial, even if you're the purest capitalist in the world, from the financial perspective, those are going to be considered risky investments. There's a study that just came out by an organization called Risky Business, looking at the potential damages and costs to the U.S. economy. And basically, these are, people who have led the financial world, Bloomberg, Rubin, Paulson. These are people who've led our government in these areas and private industry. And they're saying this is not some fringe activists saying one thing or another. This is real. This is a real threat, and so I think we're going to see a transition. The question is how quickly and it can happen. And I think people being involved and educated and actively politically is an important part. Communities, have an impact if they're mobilized, if they're participating and holding their representatives accountable.
Ramon Bueno, thank you very much for this discussion. It's clear that we're going to have to do a lot more than keep our fingers crossed if we're going to prevent another Atlantis to emerge in the Caribbean and with other island nations. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for joining us on this segment of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. We'll be back in a moment. Joining us as we engage in this discussion about climate change and the impact on the Caribbean are two guests, Ms. Stina Herberg and Empress Olufunmi Jacobs. Stina Herberg is an activist working towards sustainability and poverty eradication. She's the current principal at the Richmond Vale Academy in St. Vincent in the Caribbean. Empress Modupe Olufunmi Jacobs is a Haitian-born urban environmental educator and leader in the Universal Rastafari movement in St. Vincent, leading tree planting actions as well as community gardening. Welcome very much, Ms. Sternberg and Empress Olufunmi Jacobs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're glad to be here.
It's our pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit about the project that you all are working on? What sort of work that you're conducting?
Well, the St. Vincent Climate Compliance Conference we initiated in 2012 due to all the new knowledge that we had gained about climate change and that we actually really need to take action. So from the Academy, we will always be a small group, and then we join with a big group, for example, groups that Empress is representing. So what we did the first year, because a lot of people in St. Vincent, they know the climate is changing. Not everybody knows why, but they really know it's changing because it's striking us every year. So we thought we'll have to get ready. Then to get people on board, we started to mobilize many people to pick up trash, which was the environmental problem they could easily identify. So we went through rivers, streets, beaches with school children, all kinds of people, and we picked up about 10 tons of trash, put that to the landfill. Then we have furthered into making a lot of tree planting actions and cooperating with organizations who do community gardens. Besides that, we're doing a lot of gardening here at the Academy. But the tree planting, we planted 10,000 trees, and we're about to plant another 15,000 trees this year, also with an organization that's organizing the Olympic Games in tree planting.
What has been the response of people in St. Vincent to your initiatives?
Well, I think the response has been actually a little bit way over our expectation, because what we started out doing, because when you start a program like this, how do you actually go about it? So we went out in the villages nearby and we talked to 250 people that we call Let's Talk Green. A lot of people came, a lot of people got into trying to understand, why is the climate changing? Why can't I farm like I used to farm? And I think a lot of people have been taking it on very, very well. Also, people have been really easy to mobilize to plant trees. And I think that's also a sign that people in this country, they are ready, really ready to make this island green or a climate compliant island. Of course, there's a lot to do, but we are really on the way. So I think the response has been great.
Was St. Vincent deforested?
Well, there's some deforestation, yes, but not to the extent where it's really detrimental. But we do have the problem of deforestation. And a lot of it's tied to having to do with land management and access to land and farming. So because also they're building a lot of houses, and some of that deforestation has to do with that too, placing people in homes and so on.
What sort of response have you gotten from political officials in the government?
Yeah, well, as a long-term, like I say, life activist, you can get politicians on board, but it's very important for groups like us to understand that a lot of initiation of projects and implementations comes from people. Our challenge has been to find who in the government we can work with. And there is a lot of very passionate individuals in the government who wants to have a green and clean nation. And then it's our challenge to find out, how do we work together? What do we do together? And we have this year, it's only our second year into this 10-year program. I would say that the response from the politicians and the government is really picking up, and we really appreciate that. For example, the Ministry of Agriculture have just launched one new tree planting campaign together with us. And we've had the initial meetings with the Ministry of Health and Environment, and we are getting on board their meetings and so on. So I would say there's a good progress, but it's good to realize that if the groups out there want to do something, you got to get started, because very often the politicians don't start.
Yeah, I agree with Stina that it's people power that's going to help change this trend of global warming and climate change. For example, we have laws here against dumping, yet we don't have the resources to enforce those laws. So waste management has been a big problem for us here, and we're looking at ways in which we can manage waste. So we're suggesting things like recycling of particularly the plastics, and probably banning them too. Finding alternative sources to those types of petrochemical products. The Rastafari community has been strong and pushing for the legalization of hemp here, because we see a great potential in the hemp industry in terms of providing alternative sources of fuel, alternative sources of medicine, alternative sources in terms of clothing, food. It's an entire industry, as we can see with the United States legalizing that industry for particular medicinal use and so on. Well, we're pushing for the total legalization in terms of industrializing it and having it in a way that it makes an impact on the environment, a positive impact, not a negative impact, as it's doing right now, being an illegal plant.
The lessons that you've learned in St. Vincent, are they applicable in other parts of the Caribbean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, because what we're doing, it's no magic, you know. Education is very important to get people on board. So I think that people could come and study with us in St. Vincent if they find inspiration here, bring that back home. We are developing different study materials. And then we are developing, for example, like nurseries, so that we're not developing it. It's already developed. but we use all low-cost local solutions. And to start to clean up, you can always, I think you can nearly always get the local supermarket to donate you some plastic bags. And it is really to get going. And at the Academy here, we are training people from the Caribbean and from around the world to become environmental activists. So people could come from all the different countries in the Caribbean, study and take action here at the Academy, and bring that right home.
Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing this time with us and helping to give not just a presentation of the problems, but some incredibly exciting responses that people can undertake in reacting to this climate crisis that could undermine the Caribbean and, in fact, the planet as a whole. Thank you both very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. We'll look for you next time.
We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? Analyze every move on Critical Moves. Weekdays, only on teleSUR. Different causes motivate people to look for new horizons. We'll have the right to move freely beyond the imposed walls. Imaginary lines are shown between the hostility towards some
y la oportunidad de otros para forjar nuevos caminos.
Buscamos la respuesta a las inquietudes del siglo XXI.
Between Borders. Thursdays, only on teleSUR. Community organization and revolutionary verse fused in And Don't Stop. A window to urban culture and political resistance, conducted by the hip-hop band Rebel Diaz. And Don't Stop, Fridays, only on teleSUR. Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on innovation, conservation, human well-being, and human rights. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with At the Moon. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. We defend the struggles of peoples in resistance fighting for their rights. Between Borders. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identity on By Gender. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on teleSUR, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean. some habits pose risk to your health. Connecting mind and body can help overcome these issues. A healthy lifestyle allows us to have personal well-being and harmonious relationships. Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
Bienvenidos a este espacio de teleSUR, un espacio que rompe con las barreras de la armonía mundial. Con ustedes, Laila Tajeldini. Cuando todo apuntaba
when everything pointed to an imminent confrontation between Russia and Turkey, when this country on November 24, 2015 dared to bring down a Russian plane in order to provoke and cause reaction from this country that benefited that goal, the interests of NATO in the zone. In politics, everything can be reverted during the night. The determining event was July 2016, 1 year later, after a Russian radio station, Tartus, captured the transmission of NATO in Turkey, and how the coup was being prepared against the Turkish president. Russia warned Erdogan that he was going to be turned over, and he was able to prepare. They also learned it was the United States who betrayed him, and when he tried to go to Germany, Angela Merkel refused to receive him. Therefore, because he found out that European also betrayed him. And this is how the panorama turned around, and the Turkish president turned around his policy, especially regarding Moscow and Tehran, because Iran allowed him to land on his territory until the situation in his country was controlled. In today's Jugada Crítica, the strategic relations Russia, Turkey, Iran affect Western plans in the zone. Russian, Turkish, and Iranian presidents signed an agreement to continue their cooperation to achieve peace in this Arab country. Putin, Rouhani, and Erdogan agreed how the strategic goal of eradicating terrorists in Syria that are still unstabilizing that country. This is the second meeting held by the three countries. The first summit was held in Sochi in November last year, 2017. Let's listen to the three leaders analyzing this meeting. We are cooperating together to resolve regional problems, including Syrian problems. I am pleased to have this meeting with you because it's the opportunity to talk about the improvement of bilateral relations and discuss regional topics, including Syria. We cooperate in regional matters, especially in what concerns Syria. The conversation of Sochi that were your initiative were an important step for the Astana agreement. After this, the important Syrian peace agreement was held in Sochi. It was very important to discuss stability and security in Syria, the return of refugees decided by the vote of Syrian people are our main goals in Syria. And geopolitical expert Alexander Dugin states that the triangle between Ankara, Moscow, and Tehran is key for the Euro-Asian project and the multipolar world. These are the three decisive actors in the Syrian conflict. Turkish presented a key geopolitical condition because it is set in two continents, between two worlds, east and west, located in the Balkanic Peninsula, Anatole, and it limits with Bulgaria, Greece to the west, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan to the east, Iran, Iraq, and Syria to the south. It is a key place. After the failed coup in 2016, Ankara has promoted its relation with Iran and Russia, which established an influential triangle in the eastern region. This will oppose Western plans in Near East. Now we will analyze with our correspondent in Russia to tell us about first the bilateral meeting between Russia and Turkey and the results of this three-way summit between Turkey, Iran, and Russia.
Sí, hola, un saludo para ti y para toda nuestra teleaudiencia. Así es. En un inicio se produjeron
Initially, diplomatic tensions appeared with Turkey and Russia upon the destruction of the Russian plane. And after Russia said that they did not invade the space, there were sanctions by Turkey. And let's remember the attempt in Istanbul in June 2016, where Russian president also called Erdogan to pay his condolences to the death of 42 people. Then relations started normalizing between both countries, and this influenced in this topic.
Justamente a Hansel Oro, nuestro corresponsal.
We lost our connection with Hansel Oro, but as he was explaining, the sale of weapons, anti-missile shields that will be delivered next July to Turkey, and that are very important for their defense. A policy that separates it more from NATO and approaches Turkey to this new axis, Iran, Turkey, and Russia. This three-way axis that we can say today is working for peace in Syria. We are going to review our web pages. First, Hispan TV, under Putin and Erdogan launched the first nuclear reactor of Turkey. It tells that the Russian and Turkish presidents, Putin and Erdogan, have participated this Tuesday in the official ceremony of open inauguration of the works of the first Turkish nuclear station, which will start operating in 2023. Turkey is also prepared to purchase anti-air missile systems from Russia, according to an agreement which has disturbed some of its allies in NATO. Among other news, we will review Russian webpage Sputnik, Russia, Turkey, and Iran work for sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity in Syria. There's three-party meeting held in Ankara led to the signature of a declaration stating that they will cooperate to achieve peace in Syria and eradicate terrorist group Daesh. They also called the world to collaborate to provide humanitarian assistance to Syria and collaborate with the Constitutional Commission of that nation. They also emphasized on the efficient format of Astana to reduce violence in Syria. Our recommendation today is the article published in voltairenet.org called Towards Post-War in the Middle East. It's an approach about Russian events. It says that Russia has become a very important actor in the world geopolitics against U.S. hegemonic interests, and that its role has focused on to guarantee international law in Syria. This was written by Thierry Meyssan, a French intellectual who interprets long-term relations and says that the events in Syria the last years was not a civil war but an external aggression and part of a regional war of 17 years in the Middle East. This great conflict where Russia appears as the winner before NATO. A new world balance is arising, besides the commercial plans that China has in the Middle East and the wars that the United States and UK are planning together with the European Union for the conflict to continue in that region. With this recommendation, we'll make our first pause with the next question. What was the activating element of the change in relations between Turkey and Russia? Participate through @teleSUR TV, @Laila Tajeldina, under the tag Eje Rusia, Iran, Turquía. We'll be back. Russian President Putin stated that there are no negative factors that can frustrate Russian-Turkish projects. This contrasts with a diplomatic crisis between both nations 3 years ago. Let's see. Relations between Moscow and Ankara went down after a Turkish craft brought down a Russian military plane that returned to its base after bombarding terrorist goals in Syria. Later, the relations between Moscow and Ankara seem to be in the best times. There is no negative effects between our relations, and our bilateral relations are very constructive. This was said by Vladimir Putin in a recent press conference with his Turkish peer. And he set several projects as examples performed between Russia and Turkey, the gas duct and the station Akuyu, which was inaugurated by both presidents during the first visit of Russian president after his re-election. We will start analyze with Ruth Ferrero from Spain, professor of political science of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Welcome, Ruth, to Jugada Crítica. A two-day visit paid by Russian president to Turkish territory territory concluded today. We must remember barely 3 years ago the relations between both countries were different, because in November 2015 a direct attack was made by Turkey to Russia and brought down an aircraft, something that President Putin called a provocation for a reaction, but a scenario has changed. What was the essential element that caused this change, and why can we say now that both are so important in the Middle East, the axis Russia and Turkey? Good afternoon. From Spain. Thank you very much for inviting me. The relations between Russia and Turkey, I think, yes, there was a diplomatic crisis 3 years ago after Turkey brought down a Casa airplane, and we must remember that the Russian ambassador in Turkey 2 months later was withdrawn. But now we find some kind of mutual support by two regional powers, both with an objective interest in the Mediterranean area and the Middle East. Both participated in the Syrian conflict allied with Iran, and both support the current government in Syria. What has changed? The global scenario has changed. I would say that the relations between Russia and Turkey must be seen in a broader context beyond the regional aspects. In 2015, we had the Ukrainian conflict and Crimea, and the eastern relations with Ukraine in conflict with the Ukrainian army. And we also saw that there's an intention by given actors, both Russian and U.S. actors in essence, that wish to start a new Cold War between Moscow and the West. In this context, we see that certain alliances are made between actors, in this case Russia and Turkey, but on the other side of this built conflict, we find the positions of, for example, UK, the United States, and Western Europe. We can mention Macron in France. Perhaps the German position is slightly different, but all the countries that are border with the ancient Soviet Empire, the Baltic countries, Sweden, that in the recent months are asking the European Union to support them in the eastern border of Europe. Therefore, I would place this context, this situation in a broader context. Steps are being made to go back to post-Cold War, which I disagree completely, because I don't think this is a Cold War, because the factors are inexistent, but we cannot deny that meeting held between Erdogan and Putin is in a critical diplomatic crisis with the Western countries, between Moscow, London, Germany, the United States, with after diplomats were expelled on both sides. And there is tension, which I believe has been built. I don't think it is real tension.
De muchas de las cuestiones que se están planteando y en definitiva lo que hace es
what
generar
this does is create this tension, creates blocks that could be similar to the Cold War, except for a small factor that is essential to understand, which is the ideological issue. There is no ideological difference here. We're just watching a clashing of trains in a hegemonic expansionism by Russia seeking its place in territory that before it used to control, and the crisis in the West that also brings the need to find a foreign enemy and to increase NATO's military capacity and the increase in investment in the ministries of defense of the members of NATO. In any case, this alliance, a convenient alliance between Russia and Turkey, I was drawing a scheme about the interests. On one hand, we see that Turkey is a member of NATO, in spite of the fact that it is the disobedient member of NATO. By purchasing military material that is incompatible with NATO's rules. It is purchasing it to Russia. On the other hand, we see that the situation or the support provided to the Kurdish people in Turkey is not. We wanted to ask you about the support. You say that the circumstances were created. Other analysts say that everything is the result of a poor play by the United States and the European Union against Turkish president that led him to lean on other nations like Russia and Iran and seek for other mechanisms to stop NATO's policy in that region. And now we see another element that is incorporated in this, which are the new military bases of the United States in Syria, on Syrian territory, but that also support people that we always know Turkey has confronted, which is the Kurdish population. They say that there could be a confrontation between the United States and Turkish military. Do you think this is possible, or will they just keep tensions? What point will they reach in this Arab territory? Regarding the support to the different groups involved in the Syrian conflict, I said that Turkey and Russia, together with Iran, are supporting al-Assad, and on one hand, and the United States support the rebels. They add that they reaffirm their decision of continue eradicating Daesh definitely, and others, groups and individuals linked to Al-Qaeda. 3 presidents also agreed to contribute with the work held by the Syrian Constitutional Commission in Geneva and to continue and millions of lives in the last years. We continue with the analysis of such important topic, the axis between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. And for this, we have from Chile, Francisca Quiroga, She is a political scientist and a professor in University Arcis. Welcome to Jugada Crítica. This meeting was held between the three presidents, Turkey, Iran, and Russia. They held a summit that included the territorial integrity of Syria. How what we have been listening through the media, Turkey's intention to adhere a piece of Syrian territory. How can what the media is saying, can we understand what has been declared by the three presidents? I think that we have to see the history of this conflict and their geopolitical consequences. Turkey is has a strategic site between Europe and Asia, and it has been very attractive for NATO that at a given time we saw Turkey more closer to the United States logics, and Erdogan that moves pieces very well according to the conflict's progress, and Russia appears as a winner. If we remember that the entire conflict of Syria was based on attacking and saying that the conflict would end taking out Bashar al-Assad. And let's remember also that according to this, the United States, in its unstabilizing practice, which is common in the Middle East, armed these rebel groups that were friends, but ended up by being the weapons of terrorist groups. So we have to see the problem on a geopolitical basis. The stakeholders, interests, political targets, and Turkey, by being part of the summit, is giving a message that it is aware of how the conflict has progressed, and the reading of this Syrian conflict is no longer based on al-Assad, but the constitution and topics that Iran and Russia dealt with in the beginning. And it also allows to establish a geopolitical view of this region, in the sense that the region will not only act according to the reaction to NATO. I think we also have to see it from this point of view. Now, Turkey can make other moves. It's an unpredictable actor. Right now, it is looking at who is better positioned on scene, but it is not a reliable actor because it moves according to its interests. Yes, we also see an agreement reached by the three presidents. And these agreements, you have mentioned some regarding a new constitution and others. But we heard President Putin during the press conference where he said the three presidents have announced an agreement to increase exchange of information, and later on he said that they would confront in Syria the actors of terrorists that are causing provocations with toxic substances. So they are preventing a new terrorist attack with toxic substances that they pretend to blame the Syrian government. It seems they want to apply the same goals that Barack Obama applied, and that in its time Donald Trump pretended and continues seeking for an excuse to intervene in Syrian territory. Do you believe that at present on Syrian land, as we are looking at it, these Western troops can act? Well, the sketch has been always the same. Talk about external enemy, problems in the democracy, and the United States has always sought for resources to justify a military intervention. But what is not being said in the political propaganda of the media is that they are interested in control the routes, especially oil, geopolitical control, and have unstabilized states with internal conflicts that make them softer according to economic and geopolitical interests behind. We see this with Iraq. We saw these interventions that are invasions. The language doesn't matter, but they ultimately kill people, but the official media talk as if they are looking for freedom when they are just killing the weaker and controlling political and economic resources. I think we have to be very clear in reading these conflicts and analyzing that what is behind today is that any intervention, since Russia has military power, if Russia doesn't interfere and support Bashar al-Assad, the United States and other subliminal actors would do whatever they wished. So Russia proved its power, and today the three stakeholders are showing this. We need dialogue and diplomacy, which is the bottom topic, and the United Nations, through the Security Council, need to have much more transparent investigations. We must remember the treaties made regarding chemical weapons. There are chemical weapons, but not only on one side, but there are several sides. So the debate has to be much more transparent and based on international law, and strengthen the United Nations agency that at present are not objective actors. Since 2011, we saw a change in stakeholders in the Syrian conflict. And what we are looking at is an international attack against that nation, and that the transnational media and Western media insist on a civil war when it's clear that international factors are being confronted there. This doesn't mean they don't have internal support, but the big part comes from abroad. This role of the United Nations, remember Ban Ki-moon, but also the non-activity of the current General Secretary in the conflict. But let's talk about Ban Ki-moon. He said that Bashar al-Assad needed to leave to resolve the conflict. Now we can say that that is no longer discussable. The last declaration regarding on Syria by the head of the UK diplomacy, who stated that we must stop talking about President Bashar al-Assad's leaving his office. Now, will United Nations take a new role? Will the European Union continue with this speech, or will it be part of these dramas that are being acted in Syria? What is the perspective in the next months in Syria? I think that there's evidence of the people suffering. Let's remember the amount of refugees in the European Union that had such a hypocrite speech, because there was the conflict on the borders, but they had assessed many military actions according to NATO, and also following the perspective of intervention to struggle for democracy and save lives. I think these are void and hypocrite speeches, and this makes the United Nations confront a challenge of how to confront the conflict. It is a zone that has much instability. Remember, Israel is a constant ally of the United States now, much stronger, that systematically wishes to exterminate the Palestinian people. But with this stakeholder and others in the world that do not subject to the rules of the game and don't even want to investigate, this generates a perception of injustice, and that UN agency must be reorganized in this multipolar world. But I think the practice in the Syrian case has shown failure of diplomatic roles. They have to talk with Russia, Iran, the regional actors, and the United States should be one more at the table, but not the one that sets conditions. And the European also has changed. It's not the same 5 years ago. There is a strong advance of nationalisms, lack of political leadership. Social democracy has withdrawn because of its own crisis in managing a rights approach, and it has been unable to state a clear policy in these matters. These are the weaknesses, but the first thing they should do is deal the problem with a multipolar view. In this case, Turkey and Iran are essential to an Islamist state has withdrawn, but also other groups in the zone. We have talked about the main actors: United States, European Union, Russia, Iran, Syria itself, that has taken the worst part. Even Turkey, because we must remember that Turkey was an essential source not only to receive terrorist groups from different parts of the world, but also as transit of these terrorists. They're talking about 350,000 terrorists that cross Turkish territory, something that is scary. But everything has changed, and Turkey has changed its role, and now these terrorist groups are working directly with the United States. How can we understand after this process even a practical elimination of terrorist groups, or, as Russia said some months ago, mission accomplished? In this mission accomplished, we want to ask, is it possible to come to a much more direct land, that the United States go directly, because groups are being neutralized in the field, and each time the Syrian government with the anti-terrorist coalition of Iran and Russia and Hezbollah, they have eliminated these groups, and they have taken over 90% of territory, which is now in the hands of Syrian territory, Syrian government. Is it possible? The analysis that we can make today, Assad and the Syrian army was strengthened thanks to Russian support. Without the Russian military support that was successful, if we see what happened recently in eastern Ghouta and other in Aleppo, we saw that there's a political reading there. We must notice that Syria is not about fragmenting or arming groups, but being able to play a diplomatic role where all involved actors are part of the conflict. Otherwise,
teníamos a la profesora Francisca Quiroga.
We're talking to Professor Francisca Quiroga from Chile. In spite of the fact that some media have stated that the true goal of Ankara on Syria is taking over that territory, the Turkish president and Russian president have reaffirmed commitment with sovereignty, independence, but also territorial unity of Syria. This statement leaves aside any intention of territorial division on Syria. The U.S. president days ago said that they would take out his troops because his country had spent $7 trillion without obtaining anything, has contradicted himself and said that the bases are in Syria and will continue there. Now, if objective conditions continue recovering the territory, United States and other countries will be forced to withdraw, and at that time the victory would be final. Until the next edition, that will surely provide you an anti-hegemonic view of international reality.
We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Some habits pose risk to your health. Connecting mind and body can help overcome these issues. A healthy lifestyle allows us to have personal well-being and harmonious relationships. Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times. To swindle, I think, people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding on society for food.
Watch a series where the U.S. geopolitical strategies as an empire representing the culture of war and propaganda are shown, and how this has served as a tool of social control. Psy-War, Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Cuando me dijeron que había otra posibilidad de compartir, como compartimos en Brasil, fue una familia. Esto que vamos a hacer en Rusia va a ser lo mismo. La familia, defendernos entre nosotros. Vamos a ir a un país que no es hostil, un país donde piensan prácticamente como nosotros. Será un gran mundial. ¿Por qué? Porque llegó teleSUR también a ese mundial.
Only on teleSUR, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
teleSUR features the developments of science and technology that innovate and make the world go around.
Eso es Átomo, transmitimos desde América Latina. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas.
Technology available to everybody. Atomon. Monday, only on teleSUR. Community organization and revolutionary verse fused in And Don't Stop. A window to urban culture and political resistance, conducted by the hip-hop band Rebel Deers. And Don't Stop, Friday, only on teleSUR. The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? analyze every move on Critical Moves. Weekdays, only on teleSUR. In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on teleSUR. Community organization and revolutionary verse fused in Any Don't Stop. A window to urban culture and political resistance, conducted by the hip-hop band Rebel Diaz. Any Don't Stop, Friday, only on teleSUR.
We have been current in every event steering our people. Together in every broadcast, committing ourselves to a new South American point of view. teleSUR can now reach the Caribbean viewers from Antigua and Bermuda. We have done a lot of work on a better understanding and communication. teleSUR, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Y yo invito a que todos nos sumemos a ese desafío. Construir en Venezuela 2 millones de viviendas en los próximos 7 años. Ese es el desafío. Hemos cumplido la misión para seguir más allá, mucho más allá. 2 millones de viviendas. Hoy llegamos a las 2 millones de viviendas de la gran misión Vivienda Venezuela. Milagro, milagro chavista, milagro revolucionario.
Hello, this is from Caracas. I'm Ray Gomez. On a dream come true for millions of Venezuelans, I will talk today with Professor Nelson Rodriguez. Please join us for the next few minutes. How are you, Professor?
Thanks a lot. Good morning.
Tell us, this project of the Great Housing Mission Venezuela, I understand that its origins come from the year 2011. It was created by President Hugo Chavez, continued then by President Nicolás Maduro, but it goes back to the families that were affected in 2010 by the floods in Venezuela, right?
Sí, es correcto, una vaguada importante en el año 2010, finales del 2010.
Yes, that's correct. There was a significant flood at the end of 2010, where more than 100,000 left without houses on a national level in several states, with severe consequences in the capital, as well as Vargas, Miranda, and other states of the country.
What is known as La Gran Caracas.
La Gran Caracas, yes, and in other states of the country as Barinas, Falcón, Zulia. There were a lot of people affected, and Commander Chavez knew how, with a strategy, turn over that dramatic situation, so severe for those families who were living it. He turned it into a solution and in a state policy for housing in Venezuela.
How did he do it? What was the first thing President Chavez did with this struggle in his hands?
Yes, the first thing President Chavez did when he confronted the situation, he said, "I will take the lead in housing policies," which generated a lot of confidence in people. Even himself went to several places in high risk because of the rains and convinced them. He told them, "Come with me, let's go to a decent shelter." Then he gave the order to every public institution at all levels, national, municipal, and state, of building shelters through a law he named Law of Decent Shelters, where affected people were accepted. After that moment, became a massive housing construction program in the cities where people were. The main idea was that people didn't move to other places, but stood in the same place, provided that the terrains, of course,
were feasible.
Were feasible, without any type of risks. In Caracas, there were several cases. That was the fundamental basis of the Great Housing Venezuela mission.
Was there a census, a register to begin the procedures? I mean, did the Venezuelan government have a clear idea of how many houses had to be done or had to be built in Venezuela?
But Commander Chavez, within the cornerstone of the mission, he puts the people first. And the first thing he did was to activate a registration in all the Bolivar squares of the country.
The main squares of the municipal capitals of the country.
Exactamente, las principales plazas, centros urbanos de las ciudades y los municipios en Venezuela.
That's right, the main squares, urban centers of the cities and municipalities in Venezuela. There, people attended massively to provide data with total confidence in Commander Hugo Chavez.
What does the register give as a result? What were the first data the Bolivarian government obtained once they began to register those families with the need of housing solutions?
Fíjate, el registro se dio cerca de 2.700.000.
The registration provided near 2,700,000 families in need of housing, distributed in these approximate terms: 74% new houses and a 17% extensions and improvements.
That means the situation sums up to census of affected families.
That's correct. This sums up to the census of the affected families, which were 1,000 approximately, which were included within this registration. In fact, the first registration made deals with the affected families, followed by the whole housing deficit left by the Fourth Republic in our country.
The Fourth Republic, let's say, the previous administrations to the Bolivarian government. Well, you tell me about numbers that register delivered.
Near 2,700,000 houses needed to be built in the country. Those were calculations made by Commander Chavez according to the urban growth of population.
What does population growth mean?
Bueno, significa que en Venezuela crecen anualmente unas 100.000 familias.
It means that in Venezuela, 100,000 families grow annually. New families, that is the approximate statistic. 100,000 families a year. That's our growth. That's why Commander Chavez said, let's go straight ahead to the 3 million houses.
It was President Chavez in another moment who thought of building 3 million houses. Let's say his goal.
Yes, yes.
Y luego estuvo ahí.
And then it was planned, as I said before, the new houses, houses with extensions, houses with improvements. The data provided a whole set of features in the registration the Commander Chavez made about housing needs.
Do these houses obey to a unique format, or are they as diverse as the needs of the families in Venezuela?
One of the most important results of the registration was the composition of the families between 3 and 4 members. 70% of the population approximately. That means there is a 30% of the population with other structures, even with less of 3 members. That had an impact on the design of the houses of the Great Housing Venezuela mission in the sense that we could diversify.
This means that the registration allowed then to the Bolivarian government to design a better urban planning.
That's right. For instance, here we are in an urban state in Tuna City, where we have 1 room, 2 room, and even 3 room apartments, with facilities at first floor. It all results from the planning, as you already explained, from registration of the needs of the population that, once they attended the Bolivar squares, were registered in that census.
While thinking of a terrain, what kind of terrains were taken to build these housing estates?
There was.
What were these terrains before?
Several levels. One level referred to the underutilized terrains within the city. The impact that the costs of urbanizing the terrains have is one of the features with a considerable impact within the cost structure of urban terrains. This means roadway building, installation of pipes for wastewater, for white waters, for safe waters. In a nutshell, all that amount of installations that make possible the access to what we call the right to the city. That's one of the most expensive features.
Una de las políticas principales fue ir por aquellos terrenos que estaban subutilizados dentro de la ciudad.
Then, one of the main policies was to go for those underutilized terrains within the city, or under inadequate use, or in abandoned conditions, or where, according to the perverse capitalist logic, in something known as fattening. This means, within an accumulation system, higher prices. In socialism, the cost of the terrains is equal 0. Those who have benefited by the mission only pay for the construction costs, because socialism means construction and work.
Of course, but they don't pay for the terrain.
El terreno no se paga porque, bueno, es un bien de la naturaleza, ¿no? Entonces,
the terrain is not paid because it's a property provided by nature.
Otro nivel fue incorporar nuevos terrenos a la ciudad, como Ciudad Tiuna. Anteriormente, Ciudad Tiuna.
That is one level. The other level referred to the incorporation of new terrains to the city, like Tuna City, which belonged previously to the state and were transferred to the city of Caracas. Nowadays, a wonderful urbanism that has solved a considerable amount of the housing deficit that the capital city used to have.
For example, we are in one of these housing estates which are part of a great housing Venezuela mission. I'd share to say that referring to Caracas, the capital of the country, this is an avant-garde leading project.
Another of the great executors of the Great Housing Venezuela mission has to do with the international agreements that Commander Chavez and President Maduro established with friendly countries.
With which countries?
Se establecieron convenios con Turquía, con Irán.
Conventions were established with Turkey, Iran, China, Belarus, Russia, with Cuba, Spain, Portugal, and Brazil.
Todos estos países amigos
all of these countries were with us sharing experience with the technicians of these countries and our Venezuelan technicians for the execution of housing. In the specific case you mentioned here in Tuna City, this was an agreement with CITIC, a Chinese state company.
What's it at Tuna is today, or what it used to be?
Well, it was what we used to call Fort Tuna. These were terrains of state security. The Commander Chavez was once here in a vehicle known as Tuna, manufactured here in Venezuela, with our brothers, the military comrades.
It's the name of one of the Venezuelan aboriginals.
Correct, Venezuelan aborigines. So, with several international delegations, the housing minister at that moment, Professor Ricardo Molina, together with other colleagues of the revolutionary government and Commander Chavez, traveled through all these terrains. That's when Tuna City was born.
¿Cómo se pensó Ciudad Tiuna?
What was Ciudad Tiuna planified? Because I understand that there are places still inside this complex with military presence. I mean, military personnel live together with civil people.
Eso forma parte de la política llevada por el comandante Chávez, seguida por el presidente Nicolás Maduro, que es la unión cívico-militar. Aquí conviven militares, convive el mundo civil, ¿no?
That is part of the politics carried by Commander Chavez, followed by President Nicolas Maduro regarding the civic-military union. Here, military live together with the civil world, comrades, students, even public servers who live and make life here in Tuna City and give it the character of city. This is a policy known as the socialist city.
What is a socialist city, according to the conception of the Bolivarian Revolution?
Fíjate, la ciudad socialista es un conglomerado, un centro que satisface sus propias necesidades, ¿no?
The socialist city is a conglomerate. It is a center that satisfies its own needs.
Genera unos equipamientos necesarios para la vida, ¿no? En algunas ciudades, como por ejemplo en Ciudad Caribia, están inclusive planificadas.
Therefore, the urbanism generates its own facilities necessary for life. In some cities, as for instance Ciudad Caribia, industrial areas are planned, areas for work and education, so that you don't need to go to another place of the city, but the city generates an important life in its own nucleus, with a number of inhabitants over 2,000 in 3,500 housings. That was done in various states of the country, in several cities of the country. For example, in the case of Tuna City, it is integrated to the city, not outside of the city, but integrated to the city.
Because I understand that before this idea of the Bolivarian government, those who had the need of acquiring a new house had to migrate to those places known as dormitory towns.
That's correct. That was part of a policy both from public and private sector. Let's say that Commander Chavez and President Maduro both insisted in the fact that the cities should be redensified.
What does redensifying a city means?
Significa que en todos aquellos espacios que pueden ser destinados para la construcción de viviendas.
It means that in all those spaces that can be destined for the construction of houses and facilities, when I speak of facilities, I mean the case of the Simoncitos, of the schools, of the hospitals and diagnostic centers, all these elements that are basic for life. For example, Tuna City. All floor plans in Tuna City are equipped with facilities.
Which kind of facilities?
Han comenzado a aparecer CDI.
What's a CDI for those who are watching us abroad?
Integral diagnostic centers have begun to appear. A center of health. It is called Center of Integral Diagnosis.
With the presence of Cuban collaborators.
That's right. That's when the mission already begins to integrate to other missions, as the mission with the Cuban physicians.
The Barrio Adentro mission.
Comienzan a aparecer también otros aspectos más urbanos como pequeños cafés, pequeños restaurantes, ¿no? De iniciativas de las familias que de tal manera que se fomentan.
Also begin to appear other urban aspects as small cafes, small restaurants, family initiatives, in such manner that economy is promoted, let's say, locally, familiarly, or collectively. What we call FPU, Family Production Units, or the Social Property Units.
Además, en planta baja,
also on the first floor are the Simoncitos for our smaller children.
They are daycare centers.
They are like child care facilities. Some countries call it kindergarten or doorkeepers. Here, we call it Simoncitos.
In honor of Simón Bolívar.
En honor a nuestro libertador, entonces, en su época infantil.
In honor to our liberator in his childhood era. Then, what happens? A family that has to go to work leave their child on the first floor. That means that children doesn't change their environment. They continue being in the same backyard, with the same companions, the same friends. And then, of course, there's a higher level of an aspect people used to call quality of life, but in Venezuela, we call it the good living.
Of course, because psychologically works in favor of people.
This is, especially at that early age of children, who do not have to be raised to
extremely early hours.
3, 4 de la mañana, no, aquí simplemente se baja y el niño.
At 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. No, Here, you simply take children in their own habitat. That is very important. The urban conformation of the design is very important. Vehicles don't penetrate these sectors that are block centers. Right here where we are, they are for conversation, for our
They are like
elders.
squares.
They are like squares in some cases. We have courts also. In others, there are several leisure activities for the entertainment and recreation of inhabitants. Vehicles are always at the periphery. They never enter the block centers.
Even from the ecological point of view, that's very positive because the toxic residues of vehicles don't reach the families.
Any mother can see from her apartment where her son is at the square. There is social control over these common spaces. There was a lot of emphasis in the design of common spaces here in Tuna City. All those aspects embrace what a socialist city is.
A socialist city planified according to the welfare of people. Well, to get to the 2 million houses, is it before the President Chavez thought of 3 million, which is the actual stage?
Bueno, se superó la emergencia, ¿no? En esa acción conjunta que hubo con el comandante Chávez, luego continuada con mucha fuerza con el
The emergency was surpassed in a joint action with Commander Chavez and continued with a lot of strength with President Maduro, who raised the category of the mission to Great Mission, beside the Barrio Nuevo, Barrio Tricolor mission, and makes an interesting integration between new and remodeled houses.
¿Qué diferencias hay entre la Gran Misión, Barrio Nuevo, Barrio Tricolor y la Gran Misión?
What's the difference between the Barrio Nuevo, Barrio Tricolor mission and the Great House in Venezuela mission? Is it a repetition of the mission?
Of course, the Barrio Nuevo, Barrio Tricolor mission takes action in those places where there is already a community that, for some reasons, has deficiencies, either in the construction of houses or urbanisms.
La Gran Misión Barrio Nuevo Barrio Tricolor ha construido escaleras, ha llevado servicios, ha remodelado techos, ha remodelado fachadas.
This mission has built ladders, taken services, it has remodeled ceilings, facades, has included sanitary pieces into the houses, which many of these didn't have. That must be said. The Barrio Nuevo Barrio Tricolor mission has had a deep impact on our popular neighborhoods, while the Great Housing Mission is in charge of doing new houses. The Great Mission Barrio Nuevo Barrio Tricolor urbanizes and consolidates the houses already built by our own people. That doesn't mean they don't take actions together.
Consolida las viviendas
ya
fabricadas por nuestro propio pueblo. Eso no quiere decir que no actúen de manera.
There have been sectors where a risk sector is determined. Some houses must be removed and the rest of them are remodeled by the Barrio Adentro Barrio Tricolor, while the new ones are built by the Great Housing Venezuela mission. Then they have acted jointly. That's why I refer to the increasement of category that President Maduro made from mission to Great Mission. It was an extraordinary strategy because it gave, as a result, a double team and gave a tremendous advance regarding the right to the city, something extraordinary.
Ahora bien, profesor, suponiendo que en el futuro.
Well, Professor, let's suppose that in the near future there is not a continuity of the Bolivarian revolution and the government, I mean as a state, and the Venezuelan state gets back to capitalist hands, which could be a possible future for the Great House in Venezuela mission and for those who are benefited.
Bueno, eso es un escenario de plano, un supuesto muy negado, ¿no? Pero
that's a scenery I would define as a denied supposition. Our people has advanced a lot in its rights from the Constitution of 1999 until here. As Bolivar said, legal equality, but also practice equality. That's the meaning of revolution for our people.
But will continue a different government, the construction of houses in a similar way the Bolivarian government has done?
Here is a practical example of what could happen. In the year 2015, the National Assembly was won by rightist forces. What was the first thing they did? The first statutory act they made, or tried to make, to overturn the laws that make possible the Great House in Venezuela mission.
That means they would privatize what today we know as public welfare.
Sí, sí, indiscutiblemente, ¿no? Es un parque de viviendas, sobre los 2 millones de viviendas
That is their objective, of course. That's unarguable. 2 million houses that would mean a great business for any capitalist. But they were faced by the wall that means the organized people of Venezuela, their Supreme Court of Justice, their organizations, their ministry, the president. They couldn't privatize houses.
Entonces eso es un pequeño ejemplo de lo que significaría, ¿no? un cambio.
That's just a small example of what a change in the execution and the action of a righteous government in Venezuela would represent. A totally denied scenario.
Let's hope it's a mere assumption. Professor Nelson Rodriguez. Well, this has been from Caracas. Here in Caracas, Venezuela, we have been talking with Professor Nelson Rodriguez on the Greater Housing Mission. Thank you for joining us. Thanks a lot, Professor, for this interview for teleSUR English.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Cuando me dijeron que había otra posibilidad de compartir, como compartimos en Brasil, fue una familia. Esto que vamos a hacer en Rusia va a ser lo mismo, la familia, defendernos entre nosotros. Vamos a ir a un país que no es hostil, un país donde piensan prácticamente como nosotros. Será un gran mundial. ¿Por qué? Porque llegó teleSUR también a ese mundial.
Only on teleSUR, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Some habits pose risks to your health. Connecting mind and body can help overcome these issues. A healthy lifestyle allows us to have personal well-being and harmonious relationships. Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times to swindle, I think, people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding on society for food.
Watch a series where the U.S. geopolitical strategies as an empire representing the culture of war and propaganda are shown, and how this has served as a tool of social control. War. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
A sign of resistance to hatred and injustice, Bill Fletcher Jr. conducts a discussion and analysis space to reveal the social struggles of Black people on The Global Africa. Wednesdays, only on teleSUR. Our actions have an impact on the environment. our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on teleSUR. Community organization and revolutionary verse fused in And Don't Stop. A window to urban culture and political resistance, conducted by the hip-hop band Rebel Diaz. And Don't Stop, Fridays, only on teleSUR.
Yo pensaba que yo sabía muchas cosas derivadas de mi experiencia como parlamentaria, de mi experiencia como funcionaria que fui, de mi trabajo de participación popular, pero me di cuenta que Causa Justa me amplió el espectro realmente de lo que significan las luchas en el continente y que a pesar de los grandes atropellos de los estados que permiten el atropello de las multinacionales, además, lo fundamental es ver un pueblo resistiendo, un pueblo batallando, un pueblo echando de para atrás a quienes pretenden inclusive doblegar.
C'est pour nous faire un front commun. Problème pas, c'est pas yo. Problème pas yo, c'est pas. Pour moi-même, ça qui est plus important dans la vie, c'est le monde. Les hommes acceptent de mettre tout ensemble. Pour nous vivre en monde civilisé, nous avons tous comme imbéciles.
Yo tenía mucha expectativa y tenía muchísima preocupación cuando saliera la primera, de los primeros de los capítulos de Causa Justa. Sobre todo porque no sabía si la gente lo iba a mirar como lo mirábamos nosotros, si iba a caer bien, pero fue muy sorprendente que todo el mundo, o sea, todo el mundo puede que no se haya visto los demás capítulos, pero se vio en República Dominicana.
Estoy de negro porque estoy de luto. La nueva Constitución establece que los hijos de inmigrantes irregulares o ilegales, como dice la Constitución, no tienen derecho a la nacionalidad.
Y a partir del 2007, se han venido cometiendo varios atropellos en contra de los dominicanos y dominicanas de ascendencia haitiana.
Yo, Mari.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien, bien, gracias.
¿Cómo te ha ido?
Bien.
¿Tus hijos?
Sí, mis hijos. Tengo a Rosalba, que ya usted la conoce.
Sí.
Rosa Altagracia, por falta de documentos, está trabajando como niñera. Usted sabe, aquí, si no tiene documento, no puede trabajar.
Mari representa el rostro de los inmigrantes y de las inmigrantes pobres del mundo. Representa precisamente esos inmigrantes negros o negras que además no quieren ser aceptados más que todo por su color, pero que son utilizados, explotados porque su mano de obra es barata, es regalada, y donde se les cercena todos los derechos a ser ciudadanos o ciudadanas. Este programa de Causa Justa tiene que servir para que los hijos de Mari puedan terminar una carrera y puedan decir orgullosamente que son de República Dominicana.
Lo que yo quiero estudiar es ingeniería industrial.
¿Y estás preocupado por el problema que tienes? ¿Por qué? A ver, dime.
Porque mi madre tiene muchos años luchando con eso.
Sí.
Y la Junta como que no quieren que nosotros tengamos nuestro documento.
Bueno, pero Causa Justa vino precisamente porque estábamos muy preocupados con este tema. Así que esperamos que cuando algún día nos volvamos a encontrar ya sepamos que estás en la universidad. Dame un abrazo. El hecho de tenerse que ir para otro país y mirar sus condiciones en República Dominicana da cuenta de la condición de parias que nosotros creíamos que en el mundo eso ya no existía. Córrete para allá, mi amor. Y entonces, ¿qué? ¿Tú duermes en esto? Sí. Pero fundamentalmente del modelo neoliberal expulsor, de empobrecimiento, de miseria, y como que se le estuviera cobrando a Haití durante todo el resto de la historia el hecho de haber tomado la decisión de ser libres. C'est bien?
Oui.
Oui?
Oui.
Et moi?
Je suis Santana Maslin. Moi, j'ai 7 petits. Je suis mort depuis 2001. C'est moi-même.
La historia de la familia Santana es tan estremecedora porque son un ejemplo de vida, son un ejemplo de solidaridad, pero sobre todo nos permitieron ver en Causa Justa cómo es que ha sido posible para el pueblo haitiano sobrevivir, cómo logran socializar todo lo que consiguen, cómo lo reparten, cómo lo juntan.
Ça fait, moi pote manger pour Rosna, voisine Rosna, c'est parce que les fait manger les liens, les banou, c'est comme ça tout nous font sorte de partage, les gain bal. Pour qui ça nous fait solidarité, ça c'est parce que des fois yo gagné, nous pas gagné, nous gagné, on pas gagné.
Lo de los campesinos es muy sorprendente. Uno no se imagina que el experimento que se ha hecho con Haití fue para impedirles la producción de lo que ellos producían, de sus alimentos, el arroz como un símbolo prácticamente de lucha nacional y fundamentalmente de poder conocer el impacto de lo que son esas medidas neoliberales en el campo haitiano. Los campesinos haitianos son una bandera y yo diría que deberían ser una imagen en el mundo de lo que es la resistencia en defensa de la producción agrícola y de la soberanía alimentaria.
Nous avons plusieurs problèmes dans l'activité que nous avons menée. C'est ça que fait nous-mêmes dans le réseau Rakpaba qui est coopérative. Nous mettons nous ensemble pour nous améliorer les conditions de vie qu'on a habitué à travailler.
C'est américain, moyen pour vivre puis rapide là c'est notre gain. Pas de géopolitique en fait là, la géopolitique multinationale. The same thing happened to the antibody rice. They came out with the rice from outside with a cheap price. Before that, antibody rice could give food, could aliment 75% of Haitian people. That's all the processes they do during a period just to kill the antibody rice, just to come out with the rice from the United States of America.
La relación entre Haití y México es muy grande. Yo me quedé impresionada con darnos cuenta, por ejemplo, lo de Haití, desmantelamiento total, una muy precaria producción agrícola y cada vez más en México ha ido desapareciendo un cultivo tan importante como el maíz. Ya no se encuentran prácticamente las especies que existían, o sea, se va dando la misma dinámica en un tiempo tan precoz como el que se ha venido dando en México. Es exactamente igual porque, vuelvo y reitero, las consecuencias van a ser devastadoras e iguales.
El Tratado de Libre Comercio de América del Norte institucionalizó el modelo económico neoliberal y funcionó como el candado que impide dar marcha atrás a las drásticas reformas estructurales realizadas.
Actualmente estamos importando 35% del maíz, ¿no? Y estamos sufriendo una contaminación de todas nuestras variedades con el maíz transgénico de Monsanto.
Bien, yo con el estilo claro que te canto, después este estilo se convierte en llanto, y como no que hablamos de Monsanto, después este estilo claro que es un llanto, y como pasa que soy yo transgénico, después estilo claro que suena técnico, y como no claro que suena técnico, como quieren hacer el maíz pues transgénico.
El papel de Monsanto es atentar
particularmente contra la producción campesina, contra la pequeña producción, tratando de apoderarse del mercado.
Bueno, Silvia es una mujer extraordinaria por una razón muy sencilla, porque se ha dedicado a la investigación de lo que es el impacto de las decisiones inclusive estatales mexicanas a través de la legislación, para abrir precisamente esa legislación desde el punto de vista agrícola y permitir que los productos transgénicos entren, que Monsanto pueda apropiarse precisamente de las tierras y de la producción e imponiendo el tipo de producción que quieren. Es muy aleccionador para lo que está ocurriendo en Colombia también. En una frase, ¿usted qué diría que es Monsanto?
Monsanto es una pesadilla para los campesinos, para la soberanía alimentaria y para cualquier país que quiera definir y producir sus propios alimentos.
Cuando el maíz estaba hecho de maíz, lo cosechábamos, comíamos y sembrábamos, lo desgranábamos en un tris y lo molíamos en un desliz. Se le notaba en la raíz y lo exportábamos hasta París.
No podemos permitir que nos metan el maíz transgénico, que es un alimento para puercos.
Hoy son transgénicos, genéticos clonados, biotecnológicos modificados. Hoy son parásitos, engendros mejorados, farmacultivos contaminados. Ya no hay ni maíz, ya no hay maíz, ya se acabó nuestra raíz.
El Tratado de Libre Comercio se firma en 92 y trata, digamos, de volver irreversibles todas las medidas de privatización, de desregulación y de apertura completa que se han venido construyendo entre 82 y 88.
Bueno, una de las características del modelo neoliberal, de las políticas de privatización y de apertura de los países, tienen que ver precisamente primero con el desprestigio de los congresos, con el desprestigio de los sindicatos y con la manera como buscan la desafiliación para que todos estos sectores sindicales que están en el caso de México, en el sector energético, por ejemplo, fueran desvinculados, porque supuestamente no se requería una nómina tan alta y mucho menos unos sindicatos que lo que hacían era robarse la plata de la gente. Exactamente igual, vuelvo y reitero, a lo que ha pasado en países como Colombia, en la región latinoamericana.
Lo de la huelga de hambre me nació por el coraje que tengo con el gobierno, ¿verdad? Porque era injusto de que nos mandaran a la calle.
Bueno, ¿y qué te trae a la memoria toda esta zona, todo el Zócalo, pues que es un símbolo, un espacio de resistencia?
Mucha tristeza, mi hermana.
Porque
la lucha que nosotros llevamos a cabo, pues llevaba un fin, ¿verdad? Un fin común, que era el lograr recuperar nuestro empleo, que injustamente el presidente Felipe Calderón realizó, mandando a la calle 44,000 trabajadores.
Hombre, Cayetano Cabrera es una luz, es un espíritu de lucha, es similar precisamente a lo que son sus ancestros indígenas. Un hombre que a pesar de lo que ha significado la huelga de hambre, entrega absolutamente todo y la familia totalmente alrededor de él por defender a México, por defender el país, por defender la industria mexicana. ¿Sabe qué significa Cayetano? Cayetano es la esperanza para quienes, como yo, por ejemplo, luchan pensando que no hay una posibilidad, que no hay una esperanza. De las cosas más lindas, Causa Justa tiene de maravilloso que la mayoría de la gente son héroes anónimos.
Ahorita él a veces le ha entrado la frustración de que no se ha logrado nada y me dice, si me dan mi liquidación, y le digo, no, ya aguantaste tanto tiempo. Pero es que los gastos, porque no tenemos casa, nosotros pagamos 5,000 pesos de renta. Y a veces nos cuesta trabajo juntarlo, pero hay que tener fuerzas. A mí no me pesa trabajar. Si yo ayudo a mi esposo, adelante.
Pero aún así el gobierno nos estuvieron sobornando, ¿verdad?, para levantarnos del movimiento. No lo lograron porque, pues, la verdad yo soy una persona que no tengo precio, no tengo precio.
Es muy importante saber que una familia popular que vive de lo que trabaja tenga semejante dignidad.
Claro, así es.
Tanto decoro.
Paradójicamente, uno de los problemas de México es su legislación laboral. Le da tantos privilegios a los trabajadores sindicalizados que las grandes empresas son las únicas que pueden aguantar el costo de nuestra legislación laboral. En México, más que gente pobre, explotada por un trabajador, tenemos empresarios frustrados que por tanta corrupción, por tanta reglamentación, no pueden hacer crecer sus empresas.
Yo no sé si es un cinismo impresionante, pero lo que sí nos da cuenta las respuestas es de que todavía tenemos mucho por qué luchar, tenemos mucho por hacer los humanistas del mundo.
Somos orgullo, porque han sido capaces a pesar de los despidos, a pesar de la invisibilidad de los medios de comunicación que no quieren dar a conocer las luchas del pueblo mexicano, de los trabajadores y de las trabajadoras, de los trabajadores mineros, de los trabajadores agrícolas del campo que tienen que soportar a la gente naranja Monsanto tratando de matar de hambre y acabar la soberanía alimentaria, no solamente de México, sino de toda nuestra América.
México nos permitió ver lo peligroso de lo que es el Tratado de Libre Comercio en sus impactos, un Tratado de Libre Comercio firmado en condiciones absolutamente desfavorables para México, y eso es lo que nos avisora, es lo que va a pasar en este país, lo que va a ser a futuro, el desastre para la industria nacional, el desastre para la producción nacional, pero sobre todo una indignación total de ver el saqueo del país, el robo de las riquezas naturales, el robo de las riquezas minerales, y lo que más me indigna de todo eso, de la situación que viven, es que los barequeros de toda la vida, los mineros de toda la vida pasaron a ser delincuentes de cuenta de la entrega del país.
Y Santos, que es un irresponsable, levanta la teoría de que es que todos los pequeños y medianos mineros o son paramilitares o son guerrilleros. Catalogarlos así tiene un propósito clarísimo, que es erradicarlos, eliminarlos, para que toda la minería en Colombia sea minería transnacional.
La minería a cielo abierto no debe de ser, ni aquí ni en ninguna parte del país, porque vemos que en otra parte, en otros países, dicen que es que ya no dejan. Aquí se pueden llegar. El presidente Santos sí puede aceptar eso, que nos respete a los colombianos. Eso es lo que debe ser el presidente Santos, junto con sus multinacionales.
What the industry has proposed to the state regarding to mediation with the communities through the Ministry of Interior Affairs has turned violent. Communities and villages today help the militarization of their territories. Consequently, they are evicted from their homes.
5 millones de personas desplazadas o desaparecidas o muertas, o sea, costos en vidas humanas, pero sobre todo con costos en lo que significa la construcción de la paz. La paz pasa precisamente por la defensa del territorio, por la defensa de los derechos humanos y por la discusión de otro modelo de vida diferente al que tenemos.
Desde Fajándose Music, mi tierra, mi territorio, mi cultura, siempre, siempre.
¿Cómo es posible que después de que uno ya hace eso y se siente como que este es nuestro territorio, llegan unas personas que no tienen ni idea cómo se conforma ese lugar a querer sacar a las personas?
Se territorializa el capital, se establecen unas formas de control de ese territorio que necesariamente implican un despojo para la gente.
No quiero que nos despojen de lo que juntos hemos hecho. Voy para adelante, marcando territorio, que ellos se den de cuenta que no nos sacarán a todos.
Pero creo que las cosas que más nos pudieron haber impactado son los ojos de Eustaquio, un campesino costeño de las sabanas de esa región, que eran de una profunda tristeza.
Yo soy de la comunidad del Vamos, me tocó venirme va para 3 años, sí, 2 años, 3 años va a ser. Ahora en diciembre, que en noviembre me amenazaron, yo era líder de esa comunidad, y me dijeron que si tenía 2 decisiones, o sea, 2 cosas, 2 caminos. Si continuaban con esta bobada, me decían así, me asesinaban. Se reunieron unos paras en Bajirá, me contó la persona, pero me dijo, prométame que usted no va a decir esto. Entonces dijeron, bueno, vamos a darle una opción. Renuncia de todos los cargos que tiene de ese proceso, andar reclamando tierra, y que se quede callado para siempre y no pronuncie más nada. O lo sacamos del camino.
¿Sabe qué puedo decir? Que no lo puedo olvidar. Que su mirada atravesó el alma, pero que su mirada también me puso a hacer y a decir las cosas que he estado diciendo en el país, a luchar, a resistir, pero sobre todo a defender el país. En los ojos y en los rostros de ustedes hay muchísima tristeza. Nuestra venganza tiene que ser la felicidad y nuestra venganza tiene que ser la alegría.